Here with Jennifer Hammond, DC Girls Baseball Club, Washington Nationals, Eastern Women's Baseball Conference, Thomas Jefferson High School, and the Alexandria Aces. So, I mean, can you fit anything else into your schedule?
I'm going to say no. We're at the point where I think I have successfully filled up my 7 days a week.
Yeah, yep. And that's just part of the coaching deal, just kind of make it all work. And I noticed, what did you love about Cal Ripken?
Oh my gosh, I grew up loving him. I think part of it is just the nostalgia of it was something that my brothers and I shared. I got to go with my youngest brother the night he broke the record. I mean, it's just a guy I liked. I wore his number. I think anybody in this area, we didn't have another team, right?
Yep.
So I was blessed to grow up watching him every day, and I loved the way he did it, right? Just humble, work hard, show up every day.
Did you get to see a lot of Orioles games growing up?
I did not. The irony is, I've seen more games as an adult than I ever saw as a kid. It was tough for my parents to get up there. By the time I came around, I was the last of the kids, and I think we maybe made one game.
Yeah, we missed Pete Rose breaking Ty Cobb's record by one game. So we went to actually the day before he broke
No.
it. But it was cool being in the stadium with all that. When you get a chance to see history, it's awesome.
It's a special thing. I appreciate it more as an adult, certainly, but it's fun.
And there were no options for you in baseball, right, growing up?
No, I mean there was occasionally a girl that would go and play, through Little League and then kind of get pushed towards softball. And God bless my dad, he was looking out for me. He just figured, no, you're going to play softball. We're not going to go through this. They were protective, right? I was the only girl, three older brothers, all rough and tumble boys, and he just kind of felt like, yeah, no, we're gonna do what everybody says we should do, and you're gonna play softball.
Yeah, is that the gratifying thing being with the DC Girls Baseball Club is trying to help girls along the way, kind of fight that a little bit?
I love it because it's an opportunity for them to play where so many of them are either the only girl left on their team, or some unfortunately don't even have that opportunity anymore. Just run into organizations that are not real open to it, even here in 2023.
Yeah, which is wild to me that we're still at that point where we're still
Yeah,
trying to fight that because it shouldn't be a thing.
yeah.
What has the Eastern Women's Baseball Conference meant to you?
It was a home for me. The guys that I grew up playing with, the gals that I grew up playing with, I mean, that became a second family to me, much the same way that a college team would have. But to finally have a place to play baseball and to get to play competitively with the tournament group, it just that group. I mean, it's funny how it's kind of come full circle, and I'm one of the coaches of that team now. But that group, when I was at 18, 19, and just desperately wanted to play baseball, was a home, and it was a place where I finally got to play the game that I'd wanted to, in an environment where everybody there was so happy to be playing. You didn't have a lot of the cliques or things you might have elsewhere.
Is that when then inspired you to get into coaching? Was the playing side of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of an accidental thing. I was not ready to do more coaching. And then a friend of ours was the DSA at a school. They lost their softball coach, said, hey, can you cover? Friend of mine and I got into it. And then from there, we would spend our time watching the baseball games. And eventually the baseball coach said, hey, ladies, why don't we go out for a beer and talk about baseball? And I said, look, I'm going to need new JV coaches next year. Is this something you guys would be interested in tackling? And it was, again, I wasn't ready for that high school commitment yet, just in terms of schedule wise, but boy, I loved it.
I mean, what were some things that stuck out about the coaching side that maybe you didn't realize as a player?
You know, I appreciate my coaches a lot more now. Um, I never realized how much work goes into running a high school practice, running, a practice as the kids get older. And for a good coach, right, you can do it different ways, but I don't like to do things half-heartedly. So understanding what it takes to be a coach that's actually somebody that's going to make an impact with these kids, teach them the game, and hopefully use this game as a vehicle for life. Teach them how to handle failure, teach them confidence, competing, resilience. It was a lot more work than I anticipated, certainly. And there's a lot more kind of people managing than I realized, right?
I think that's
So
the art of coaching is the people management side of that you don't realize. There's so much gray area with the individuals that you coach that it's really an art form to be a good coach.
it is. And I'm watching and learning. I understand now. I go back to conversations I had with my high school coaches, and I have a lot more appreciation for what they did for me. Um, I had a funny conversation with somebody the other day. I also appreciate how, we used to tease some of our coaches about being out of shape and eating junk food, showing up with a bag of fast food. Yeah, I get that now. I get that now real well, too well.
Did anybody ever say, "Hey, you should reconsider getting into coaching? You shouldn't do it"?
No, I mean we've had a few parents. It's interesting because I've kind of had experiences across the board. For the most part, once you have a conversation with someone and they recognize that you understand the game, then you're good. There have been a few parents that were kind of incredulous, like, right, so I'm sorry, did you play softball? Because I don't, how are you going to coach my son? Most of the time, it's not mean spirited. It truly is just a lack of context and an unintentional ignorance. So I try to be patient with it and not be reactive to it. There have been very few truly negative experiences.
My parents tried to talk me out of it. They did.
Is
They
that
sat
right?
me down. Yeah, my dad was a longtime college baseball coach, and so I grew up around it. And when I really decided, like, hey, this is what I want to do, they both sat me down and like, hey, you should probably reconsider doing this because it's not going to be easy. And they just wanted to make sure that I kind of knew. But growing up around it, I kind of knew, but they're like, hey, you're making more money bartending right now than you are coaching. Like that's not going to be your lifestyle going forward for a while. Like you have to really temper, what this is going to be, and you have to be realistic about your lifestyle and all the sacrifices that go into it. So I think they just wanted to kind of prep me, and their heart was in the right place, but I wasn't going to listen to them anyway.
And it's a good thing you didn't, but I completely understand that because it's not, it opened my eyes just in terms of looking at like, hey, do I want to coach at the next level? What's that going to look like on a day-to-day basis? Because like you said, I'm piecing together two or three different things to pay the bills. I wouldn't change a thing. I'm grateful to do something that I enjoy, but it is not for everybody.
Yeah. What have been the biggest difference for you, because you're on the youth side, the high school side, the college side? What have been the biggest difference with those age groups of kids?
It's interesting to me because I want the kids to enjoy it and have fun, and I want to keep them in a sport that is competing right now, to maintain that demographic, that youth movement. At the same time, it's really fun to me to see the college guys having a blast. Now, albeit it's summer ball, but they're there because they have something to prove, and they've all got something that they're trying to do before they go back in the fall. Um, I've seen, ironically, to flip your question, more similarities. It's the same issues, that we're dealing with. It's building confidence. It's learning how to handle failure and frustration. It manifests a little differently in the kids than it does in the adults. But it's really, I've been surprised at how many of the issues run current through all levels.
How are you helping them reframe that failure piece to learning?
Understanding that failure is not something to be feared. Failure is a friend and probably the best teacher that life has, especially, I mean, we talk about all the time the cliche, right? The best hitters in baseball are failing 7 out of 10 times, or in today's game, 7.5 out of 10 times, right? And getting them to understand that that's your best teacher. So not to be afraid to make those mistakes, but to set the goal of, I'm not going to make that same mistake 2, 3, 4 times. I'm going to let it teach me.
How did you get connected with Chris Bursett?
It's funny. Years ago, I had gone in to do some hitting work with him when I was playing more competitively. And I had reached out to him, I think it was in 2019, it was right before COVID. And I said, hey, look, coach, I'd like to get a better education, some exposure. Obviously, I didn't play baseball in college. Can I come shadow you, for a week or two with the Aces? And boy, to his credit, I thought he was just shutting me down. He said, nope. And I went, oh, well, that didn't go quite as planned. He said, no, no, no. He said, if I'm going to preach to the players, they have to be there every day and commit 100%. I'm not going to have a coach come in for a couple of weeks. He said, would you be interested in coming on for the whole summer? And I said, wow, if you'll have me, that'd be great. And as it turned out, I went from what was intended, I think, initially to be more of an internship, kind of an unpaid sort of thing, to a position opening up. And it's just been great. I love how he coaches, and I love his knowledge of the game. Right? A lot of catchers become managers for a reason. So, working with him and listening to the way he manages games and pitchers, I'm just sitting there like, all right, let's make some mental notes, trying to absorb it all.
He's very complimentary of you, by the way. He says you've done a great job for them. So you do a great job in the dugout. He did mention, like, when things get tense, you hum or sing a little bit. And I had different ways to kind of handle the stress as a coach, but I'm always intrigued by what coaches use to kind of get themselves to stay in the middle and stay centered.
Yeah, it's funny. Humor's been a mechanism that I just inherited family wise, and so sound effects. It's funny how it manifests. But yeah, I think I drove him nuts a few times. But it's just how, because when you're a catcher, you're in the game, you're talking the whole time, and there's a way, as a coach, I'm still trying to figure out where to channel that extra chatter.
Yeah, what are your other duties in game and then pregame?
So pregame, a lot of it is just making sure the guys know, who's hot for the night, how are they feeling, making sure everybody's ready to go. Just kind of getting a sense of where they're at if we need to chat a little bit. We had a couple kids that had just come out of high school last year. It's a very entertaining picture of me talking to one of the kids. I think he's 6'5", 6'6", and I'm looking up at him and he's asking me all these questions, get real nervous. And I'm sitting here just laughing because, the physical relationship is one thing. I'm looking up at him, but he's looking down at me. Yeah, like, all right, so let's talk again about managing runners. Like, what is it that I need to, it's entertaining to me to have those conversations. And I have to remember, hey, this is a man child, but he's still a kid and he's learning, this is his first summer at this level of competition. But a lot of it is just kind of triaging, right? So whatever needs to be done. And then the usual stuff, right? Get to do a little field work. You know how it goes with summer league, right? Little field work, get the mud bucket and rub down the balls for the game. Kind of a little bit of everything, but I love that because I'm getting to pick up from different areas, different stuff.
Which level do you feel like you've grown the most as a coach?
I think probably between high school and the college ball. I mean, it takes you out of your comfort zone. And I think for me to go into that knowing that I didn't play, college baseball, I haven't been around that environment. Really kind of walk into the room knowing, hey, I may be the person here who has the least firsthand experience. And at the same time, be able to project enough confidence that the players will respect and recognize I do have some things to offer, but I'm learning too, and kind of strike that balance. So I think that's probably pushed me the most out of the comfort zone.
And coming in with fresh set of eyes is a good thing too. I've said it a lot. Like, there's nothing wrong with somebody who doesn't have the type of experience because I think they bring a different perspective, and I think they're going to ask better questions sometimes than maybe that somebody's been around it their whole life.
That's a great point. And, you remind me, I'm working with some younger coaches who haven't coached a lot now, and you kind of get set in, this is the way we do things, and here's our routine. And every now and then they'll ask a question. I'm like, that's a great point. Thank you for being fresh, like you said, fresh to this and giving me a different thought. Let's change this up a little bit. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I've loved it, but I definitely feel like, it's one of the coaches my players said to me once, my child grows best when they're out of their comfort zone. And so I want you to push them. And I thought, well, here I am doing exactly what that parent wanted me to do for their kid, forcing myself into a place where I wasn't super confident, super comfortable, and just kind of, hey, buckle up, let's figure it out.
Is there a difference between coaching men and women?
I get asked that a lot. There are some, I see it more in terms of the way that men handle things and women handle things. And, don't blow up my Twitter, right? Because you're gonna step in a pie. You gotta be careful about this. I think
for me, learning styles might be a little bit different. You're still coaching. Players are players. Doesn't matter. You're coaching players, but maybe the learning styles might be a little bit different.
I watch more in terms of how one of the things I notice is kind of if there's any inter-team conflict, I watch how guys talk to each other. It's very direct, and sometimes. There's some guys that need to, and this is true of male or female, right? They need kind of that little boost, that mental boost. And there are others who just want it direct, right? Like, give it to me direct, no frills. What did I do wrong? Just hit me with it. The biggest thing that I've noticed in terms of our girls that I coach and the guys that I coach, those girls are so grateful to be playing that when they come to us in the girls organization, because they're, again, usually the only girl on their team or maybe not even able to play baseball elsewhere, when they get together in the dugout, the family environment is very different. That you don't have the cliques, you don't have a lot of that kind of high school stuff that I've seen elsewhere with some of the teams I've coached. But again, I've seen more similarities than differences. And, there are subtle differences in terms of the way that girls interact and guys interact, but there's no firm, there's not as much of a difference as I would have thought.
Yeah. I mean, how do you help inclusion with that? You know, if there's a coach out there who's got a girl that's trying out for the team, how can we help inclusion?
Well, I think a big part of it is, and the lesson that the girls have taught me is, hey, I don't want to be treated any differently. And one of the things I've noticed is some of our girls come to us having played, up through Little League, and some of them are developmentally behind where they should be because coaches have not necessarily coached them in the same way. And so I think a lot of those differences that you alluded to are things that we impose either consciously or not as coaches. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is players want to be treated as a baseball player, period. Everything else is superficial, right? And any changes in the way that you handle them versus another individual has a lot more to do with their mental makeup, and the way that they carry themselves and figuring out what they need as a coach than it does gender. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I loved having girls in camp because, again, it felt like I could help them in a variety of ways, but, again, didn't treat them any different. And honestly, some of them were physically more developed than the boys at that age and were better players at that age.
Interesting. And that's something that we see too, because in coaching kind of the younger girls at like 13, 14, some of my girls are towering over the boys, and they've already hit their growth spurts. But yeah, there are more similarities than not. And I think, again, the big takeaway is I think people just want to be treated in my case, I just want to be treated as a coach. I don't need any special treatment. I don't need a newspaper article. Like, I would just like to go coach. And the girls are the same way. Hey, I just want to play baseball. Please give me the same opportunity. Treat me the same way.
Are you modifying any of your drill work? So like your college guys drill work, high school drill work, and then with the youth kids, are you modifying any of the drill work?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Especially with catching stuff, because especially with the younger catchers as we're teaching them, I think it was Tom Griffin I was listening to, one of his seminars. It is so unnatural to tell a kid to throw their face and their chest, get your belly button behind the ball. Yeah, okay, great. So that's a hard no. That is terrifying to me. Coach, let's try something else, right? And so, yeah, like we're going to do different drills. Like at the college level, we've got a machine geared up and we're throwing everything in the dirt to give them that sense of the velocity and the bounce. With my youth players, it's like we're probably going to start with level 5 balls or wiffle balls.
Tennis balls.
Right. Depending on what their background is and their comfort level, because it's a matter of building it. But it is nice to be able to say to the high school kids when they're like, why are we doing this drill? Right. The inevitable, like, I'm not really sure I see the point of this. It's like we're doing the same thing. I'm like, I promise you they do the same thing at the next level. Right. This is the nitty gritty. This is the work you have to put in.
Yeah, I still work youth camp, and so when I'm working with the young kids, I'll be like, hey, these are the same drills I used with guys that play in the big leagues. So, like, if it worked for them, it's probably going to work for you. And I think that's the art of developing drills, too, is trying to keep it simple for everybody.
For sure. And, anytime that we can put anything fun into it, make it a little competition, that would be another way that we scale it for the kids, right? Because our attention span and our understanding of what skill we're working on may not be as developed yet. So...
With working with Chris now, what are some things that stuck out with starting to work with him, because he did play at a high level that maybe you didn't think about?
I like the way he manages catchers. I like watching the way he talks to him between innings, and talks about, hey, why not double up a pitch there? A lot of the game management aspects. And when you get that perspective from somebody who's played at that high level, I think it really helps just one, to kind of get that experience secondhand, but also to understand how many things are similar. So that's the same conversation I can have with my high school kids. Like, all right, why are we calling that pitch there? Well, I saw him kind of leaking as, he was pulling off the ball. So I thought, okay, that's great. But we threw that pitch 3 times in a row. So let's think about maybe why. Maybe we could come back to that. Maybe we could set that pitch up and come back to it. Just different conversations. But again, just watching the way he manages catchers, and also talking to him about, one knee down versus traditional. Because that's a change for him. And we had some catchers come in last year that, came out of schools that are all about one knee down. And so we had to make some adjustments, I think, in our expectations when there were some defensive differences in how we were taught and how we were brought up catcher-wise, what he experienced, and then kind of being open to that, watching him navigate kind of this newer trend.
Are you introducing that with your youth kids too?
I am. I feel like for them, it's a matter of, just like with any catcher, with any player, what's your athletic makeup? Is this something that's going to work better for you? And are you able to do the things that we need to do? And then giving them the agency also to say, hey, like with runners on, I don't feel like I can throw. from knee down, or maybe I'm not as comfortable blocking because we have younger pitchers, right? That maybe aren't going to hit their spots and they're going to miss by 6 or 7 balls instead of 2 or 3. So introducing it and then giving them the agency and the understanding of why we do it, and then just kind of trying to let them figure out what works best.
Now, with your ACES kids, your college summer kids, are you guys letting them call all the pitches?
Brissett usually does, yeah. He lets them call the pitches, but has that conversation in between innings, goes over game plan and gives them an idea of what we're doing. But
that's a fun thing with summer ball too, is because you can let them go.
Exactly, and that's what I was gonna say. Like that first part of the year is fun to just everybody gets out there, and as we're figuring out what the lineups are going to be, it's just okay. Let's here you go. Here's the keys to the car. Let's see what you do. And I love that because they're having fun and they're in an environment where again it's okay to fail. That's your your best teacher. So get out there and play, and let's see what happens, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and what are some things that maybe you've kept from the beginning that you've always used?
A lot of it for me, in terms of like
anything,
drills or
anything.
I think the big common thread, and probably something that I've decided is even more important than I realized, is kind of the mental health and the mental approach aspect of the game. And seeing how at every level that is such a significant factor in a player's performance. It's something I'm really interested in developing. I think, honestly, if I had the chance to go back to school and start over, I probably would have done something with skill set, mental skills, psychology, coach, because these are kind of the common denominators when we see kids that are struggling. There's so much of a mental health component to it, or a mental approach, and there's such a big overlap there. So in terms of something that I was always interested in, but even more so now, and have kept kind of as central to how we coach, it's probably that.
How are you addressing that with them? Like, hey, you can come talk to me about things that you're dealing with.
In part, it's letting them know that there's other resources out there. But a lot of that discussion is, hey, look, we're a family. But unfortunately, I've had a couple of players who've had some very difficult challenges. I know our youth right now are struggling. And so a big part of it is trying to reassure them that, look, you have a support and a community behind you, and you may not realize that. And it's really hard to ask for help, and we get that. But also know that you're not alone in whatever it is you're dealing with. And whether that's on the field or off the field, you have support. I've been following China McCarney a lot. I love what he's doing with athletes against anxiety and depression. I think having public figures like that be open and be vulnerable is huge, and being able to show our kids, hey, the stigma that was once attached to this is not a sign of weakness. This is something that you need to ask for help, and we're here for you. It's
going to actually allow you to play better too. His hat's right behind me, by the way. It's over his athletes against anxiety and depression.
Oh, nice,
right above me. Yeah, because when he came out with that, he was on the podcast with me. So he recorded this a couple years ago that he was on with me right when he started everything. And so I do follow China too. He's done a good job, and he's really open and honest with it. I appreciate the fact that he's willing to share his experience, because I think the more that people can communicate about that, then, again, kids are going to hear that, see that, and realize that there are resources for me. Because you look at the suicide numbers now in the United States, it's a lot. It's 45,000 people in 2022.
It's scary. It's scary. And seeing it firsthand with a couple of players, it's something that makes you more aware. And I love Brandon Geyer. While he's not doing so much with the mental health specifically, in terms of the mental approach to the game, I think it really shows the overlap and the importance of how we approach life. And it's okay to get that support.
Yeah, because he dealt with it as a player too, Brandon.
Yeah, and I think it's huge to see former professionals come out and be open about it. Because unfortunately, I think for a long time, that was just, the old school coaching was, hey, that's a sign of weakness, suck it up, get back out on the field, without really helping the player become a better player, but better person, and handle life.
Yeah, because it's hard as a player when you view your head coach or any coach that way, that like I can't really share with them because they're going to look at me different. And that's why we do a lot of our mental health podcasts, is try to get that open communication going between coaches and players. Is like they're actually going to play better if they feel safe, they feel seen, they feel like they can communicate with their coaches. They're going to play much better on the field.
Yeah, and that's my hope. There seems to be enough of a movement now where the importance of that is finally acknowledged. And I think recognizing that the return, not just on the playing field, but in terms of the kids that you're turning out into the world is so much higher when you take care of the whole person.
And we saw each other. Probably one of my favorite Barnstormers I've ever run was at the Nationals Academy Barnstormers event that we ran. You were there, and so I thought that whole lineup was tremendous.
That was a great night. You know, it's funny because Brissette was teasing me because I'm sitting there. He's like, "Seriously, you're gonna take a breath? You're gonna keep writing notes?" I'm like, "Dude, this is my right. You got the trusty coach's notebook. When I get the good stuff, you know, write it down." But it's just nice to see that the thing that I wish that I had been turned on to sooner. And Bonnie Hoffman, who you've worked with before and done a podcast, really turned me on to the ABCA as a wonderful resource. Boy, I wish I'd seen that when I first started coaching. I mean, just the ability to learn from other coaches. It's funny that some of the newer coaches I work with are like, "Do you work for them?" Because I feel like you're like an agent and you're constantly
We all
like
are.
pushing.
We all are.
Right?
That's
Like,
what's
no,
great about our organization is I feel like everybody feels like they are running the organization. Our 15,000 members, I think everybody feels like they're running the organization.
Yeah, and it's such a great resource, and it's something that's so accessible. And I'm like, "Oh no, you got to check out this podcast. Just take a few minutes on your ride into work. Just pop this in and take a listen." And it's nice to have.
You know, it's for coaches trying to get into it, and maybe coaches that don't look like everybody else. What are some tips for them trying to get into it?
I think the big thing is don't be afraid to make yourself seen, right? Go have a conversation, introduce yourself. What I've learned about the coaching community is it's very much about the people that you know. There seems to be a great willingness to pull others along. But, you know, it can be hard when you're a little bit of an outsider. And part of that is even if you're not confident, you know, pushing yourself through the door to make that introduction, to have that conversation. It took a lot for me to reach out to Chris Blind after a long time and just say, "Hey, you know, been coaching high school baseball for a while. I'd like to come work with you." I'm so glad I got over that initial trepidation and did. And you're going to find sometimes people that aren't receptive to it, but that's not the only door, right? Find another door and
it's not your tribe.
Looking.
It's okay.
Yeah, you know, like there's
tribe.
a fit for you. Exactly, and more so now than ever before.
With running a JV program, I mean, how gratifying was that when you first got to get going with that?
You know, it was a lot of fun. I think having the autonomy to do it and having someone just say, "Hey, run the program." Coming over to do varsity the last 3 or 4 years, same sort of thing. It was like, all right, cool. So, you know, we had to kind of put the work in and, you know, do the grunt work and learn. But it's so gratifying to then see like players that you work to develop then succeeding at the next level.
You guys pretty much running the same thing at the JV level as you are the varsity level. So sign sequences, practice planning, is it very similar, or are there any differences between the two?
Very much more so at TJ where I am now. And we make it a point to do that. You know, it's a smaller program. It's a science and technology school. Absolutely outstanding kids. We don't have the same amount of time to get baseball work in. And a lot of these kids don't play nearly as much baseball. So we have to really work to get as much in as we can in our like 2 hours a day, 2.5 hours a day. So everything stays the same JV varsity where we are. Same signs, same base running. We basically just take the program. Now, for some of the newer players, yeah, we have to kind of build some fundamentals first. But we try really hard to stay consistent so that transition is smooth. And so as a program, we put those building blocks in.
What's the difference with a science and tech high school?
So these are kids, they're there specifically for academics. So we have kids that come from all over the area. It's the #1 high school in the country. These are outstanding, very driven young people. And, you know, the joke is that they come for the sports. You know, these are kids that'll say, "Hey, I got to leave practice a little early. I've got an interview with Harvard." It's like, "Hey, go get him, kid. You're gonna, you know, be the next person to establish a colony on the moon, or you're gonna cure cancer. I am not gonna stand in the way of that."
So it's like Harvard, MIT, you know, Johns Hopkins, you know, that they're going to those schools.
These are your top-notch kids.
The schools I couldn't get into.
Yeah, I laugh because I you know, there is a brilliance about these kids. We also laugh about like common sense and how sometimes with brilliance, common sense is like watching them sometimes put the pitching machine together or figure out how to transport it from the shed to the field. Just makes me feel a little better about myself because they do operate at a different level. So every now and then when something, accessible and everyday challenges them, I kind of just quietly pat myself on the back and go, all right, coach, you're good.
Have you had to adjust your communication styles at all with them?
Interestingly enough, they pick up on things really, really quickly. Having said that, they're also very driven and they're used to being successful. And I think sometimes the message for them is, again, failure is a part of this game. You need to not be playing afraid to fail. You need to embrace the failure, learn from it, and figure out how to grow. Whether you think, I try not to make too many analogies, but it's like, guys, when you're doing an equation and it doesn't work out, and then you have to kind of like revamp your formula, it's kind of similar.
With the amount of different jobs you have, and that was my background too, but do you feel like, because, not that you're an outsider, because you're not, because you're a good coach, but do you feel like you have to do more? Is there pressure on you to maybe feel like you have to do more?
I think sometimes, and I've had this discussion with Bonnie before, I tend to feel like I want to know twice as much as anybody else in the room, and I want to make sure that people understand if I make a mistake, it isn't for lack of knowledge or experience. It's just like anybody else. I'm coaching and I'm going to make a mistake here and there. But I do feel like to some extent, we feel like we have to work twice as hard, be twice as prepared. There is still that sense of, hey, I got to prove that I belong here. That is changing, certainly. At every level of the game, you're seeing, for example, more and more women involved. But there is still enough of that kind of existing inherent bias that there's people that aren't going to be quite sure when I walk in the room what to expect.
Was there someone that you looked up to? I mean, because we've had a slew of women get jobs in baseball now. Was there somebody that stuck out where it's like, okay, that's a viable opportunity for me now?
It's something, I don't know that there was a person that really stood out. I think when I came around and started coaching, there wasn't just a person where I went, wow, this is great, they're doing this. I think it's all kind of happened around the same time. There are coaches that I thought were amazing regardless of who they coached, people that I grew up with or watched. But it's been interesting. I look at folks like Liz Ben, who I played with and who's now with the Mets. And I love watching what she's done. I have so much admiration and respect for her carving out a role for herself right out of college and then taking this path. But as far as coaching, there hasn't, I have mad respect for everybody who's doing it. But I'm not sure that there was really a person there when I was taking this very different path.
Do you think COVID helped accelerate some of that?
I hope so. I think in some ways because everybody was shut down and we were all communicating by Zoom, there was no kind of advantage here and there. I think it allowed a lot of people to connect and maybe form relationships that would never have been formed otherwise.
That's what I feel the same way. Because, I mean, we were all scrambling to find things to do, and you would see different people that didn't look like each other were on the Zoom chats, and I think it did bring all of us closer together and open up more lines of communication than we've ever had before.
Yeah, very, very different. And I remember a couple of conversations that I had during that time. I was like, wow, this is great. Like I've joined a Zoom and no one knew, who was on the other side of the screen. I was like, oh, this is nice. We're making connections. And, what I think most of us that are doing this would like is for the point to come where we don't stand out and it's just a thing. And so, yeah, during COVID, I think in all of the Zooms, we had a little bit of that anonymity and could just be one of the crowd.
Yep. Do you have a fail forward moment? Do you have something you thought was going to sidetrack you, but looking back now was one of the best things that happened to you?
I'll go on a personal note here. I lost a couple people really important to me to cancer about 18 months apart. Best friend, mentor, partner, and then my brother within about 18 months of each other. And it was the kind of thing where I feel like it completely flipped my perspective on life. Kind of took the wind out of my sails. At the same time, I look back on that and I go, wow, I appreciate things so much more now. I grew up. I learned the power of faith and pressing through things and kind of learned that the stuff that absolutely knocks you upside down and leaves you helpless is the stuff that eventually leads you to other paths and helps you grow into a stronger person.
Same thing for me. I've lost really close people the last couple of years, and I think it's allowed me to not let some of the external factors that you maybe normally would worry about, that I just don't worry about some of the external factors anymore.
Yeah, it's a perspective that's hard earned, but absolutely priceless.
Have you taken anything from the softball side or the baseball side?
I have my experience with softball is kind of so limited. It had been years since I played, and it was actually funny. I wasn't even sure. I had to call a friend of mine. I was like, "How am I supposed to coach pitching?" I was like, "Can you please come to a practice? Like, I don't know what to coach. Like, I'm so confused." Um, I haven't. Although there are tweets that I'll share all the time. Megrem softball. There's so much there that's great material, and there are so many great athletes and great female coaches there too. That there's plenty of resources. I just don't personally have that much experience that's carried over.
When you first got into it, you talk about, again, coaches are coaches, but if you made a mistake, did you feel like you had to be guarded as far as, being like, hey, I made a mistake there? I think we all go through that. That was hard for me in the beginning. When I got into coaching, I didn't want to tell anybody I made a mistake. But
Yeah.
did you have to feel guarded a little bit when you first got going into that?
I think so. I think, part of that was that, are people thinking I'm making this mistake because I'm a female, or are they thinking I'm making this mistake because I'm a rookie coach? Um, and I think that's just inevitable in any setting
We
like
all
that
go
where
through it. We all went through
yeah.
it.
But I mean, nobody wants to fit, right? Nobody wants to be the leader and be the one that's responsible for the ship sinking, right? So I think as a coach too, I kid my players about learning how to handle failure and don't make the same mistake twice. And boy, you better believe as a coach, I'm like, oh, all right, we're going to learn from that one, right?
I had to coach outfielders and catchers when I first got into it, and so I had caught in Little League, but had played outfield sparingly. But that was great for me from a growth opportunity and trying to develop drills, and it was a great growth opportunity. But there were a lot of days where I was like, hopefully I'm not screwing anybody up here.
It's the game will teach you, coach or player. The game will teach you quickly. You'll know.
Do you have any go-to morning routines or evening routines that you do that you like?
I try to take some time, whether it's where I'm driving to work or whatever it is, I take a few minutes, kind of say a prayer. I'm not overtly religious. I'm spiritual in that I just need to center myself, kind of take a few minutes, put it in perspective, take a deep breath. And that car is kind of the quiet time for me now. There's not a lot of quiet time elsewhere. And so at some point over the course of the day, I kind of just try to take a few minutes, be grateful for the things that are going well and ask for some strength and some positive energy to get through. And at the end of the day, just, hey, I'd like to make a positive difference in this world. I love the quote from Jackie Robinson, as cliche as it sounds, right? A life is not important except for the impact it has on others. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if the world is a teeny, teeny bit better because of something that I did, then I'll feel like what I did was worthwhile. Um,
I
but
make
without
that
that,
same distinction for me personally too, more spiritual than religious.
yeah.
I think everybody has to
Less,
find what works
less
for
on
them.
Easter weekend, I get. Exactly, exactly. On Easter weekend, I don't want to offend anyone. I want to make sure
It's all inclusive. Whatever you believe, believe.
yes.
Just be a good person. I say it all the time. It doesn't matter what you believe. Just be a good person and treat people right.
Yeah, and the world needs more of that right now, and our kids need more of that.
Working with the Nationals, has there been, because again, you see a lot of games. Who are the standouts where it's like, hey, they look different than everybody else?
Gosh, we had that World Series team that we had in 2019. Watching players like Trey Turner and Anthony Rendon and Juan Soto. Good Lord. I mean, for Juan Soto, the way the ball came off the bat, you'd hear the difference, right? Trey Turner's speed. I mean, talk about how speed changes the game. And then watching Rendon defensively. I mean, just the things I got to see up close at game speed and just going, wow, that's a different kind of player. That's a generational kind of player, especially watching Soto come up. I feel really fortunate to be able to watch that because you'll see, like, when teams come to town and you're watching batting practice, it's like, wow, the ball comes off that bat different. You hear it or you see things game speed on some of these defensive guys like Nolan Arenado, just watching the way that they pounce on a ball. It's almost supernatural.
How do we temper that though as a youth coach? Because we try to communicate that to youth coaches, like, hey, your kids aren't going to look like what you see on TV every day.
Yeah, it's a little reality check because they think, and the high school parent comes in and they're like, hey, my freshman is going to be a D1 college athlete. And you're looking at a kid who's a great kid, but you're going, all right, we should probably have some, chats about expectations versus reality. I think it's good to encourage the kids to dream and to understand that there is a next level. But I also saw a great diagram one time. The base of the diagram is all the kids playing Little League. And as you get to the very top, which is professional players, right, it's whittled down to the elitist of the elite. And I think it's just important letting them know, look, you can continue to dream, you can continue to play ball, make it your goal to play in college. But there are a lot more things out there than a D1 scholarship, or a pro deal.
I think that helped me a lot in high school. Is I wasn't even sure if I was good enough to play college baseball, so I was just trying to get better. One, I was trying to battle to get on a high school team and get on the field, so I think that helped me a lot. Just kind of temper my expectations. It wasn't even anything I even concerned myself with until later on in high school, that I just wasn't concerned with it. I was just trying to get better to help my high school team.
And that probably was huge for you. You were probably a better player and had a better
And a
experience
better
because of it.
teammate. Just
Yeah,
end up
yeah,
being a better teammate that way, because you're not worried about things out of your control.
yeah. And that's a tough thing, I think, with our current environment with travel ball and showcases playing such a huge role. It's hard sometimes to kind of deprogram the kids and get them to focus on, hey, this is a high school sport. This is an experience you're not going to get to relive. Enjoy it. Make the most of it. This is not be in the here and now.
You said you're trying to get caught up a little bit on the psychology side, the mental aspects. What are some resources you're diving into besides podcasts for to try to get caught up a little bit on the mental skills side?
Sure. So some of it's just asking around to other coaches, listening to some of Hannah Huseman stuff. A lot of it for me is just figuring out, hey, what are the resources? Where are the go-to places to kind of understand? I think
Hannah's
a lot of
talk
it.
at the convention was awesome. Her youth stage
Yeah.
talk. It was.
I was getting text messages. We had a little family emergency. I didn't get down there, but a couple of my friends were there and they were sending me snippets. And I was like, I can't wait till the podcast comes out.
She's awesome.
It's great stuff. And the fact that it's relevant. I mean, I think people forget that even professional players are going to have some of the same challenges and issues. And it's really relevant stuff. And I think it's the key.
Rachel did a great job. Bianca did a great job.
Oh,
They bring a good perspective.
yeah.
Their perspective is really good, and I appreciate all of them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That goes back to all the good resources.
Yeah. What are some final thoughts, or something I should have asked you that I didn't?
You covered a lot of stuff. I think, the big thing is I want our girls and the kids that are out there to know, hey, regardless of what the landscape looks like now, don't be afraid to keep plowing forward. Who knows what opportunities are there? And I do honestly feel like if you're willing to work hard and commit to whatever it is that you're going after, there's an opportunity for you. Just got to find your place.
Yeah. Jennifer, I appreciate you coming on, especially Easter weekend. I know we're all busy, but I appreciate you doing this. And this will come out. This is one of our minority spotlights, so this will come out here in a couple weeks, and so we'll do a highlight on everything. But Jennifer, I've enjoyed our relationship. It's been great, so I enjoy you coming on, so I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Appreciate you making time for it and looking forward to catching up soon.